Hello.
Hi, Joel.
Hey, Stephanie. Hey, Michelle.
Yeah.
Michelle, are you the host tonight?
Apparently I am.
Yes, because I could not find myself. I was panicking a little bit, thinking, okay, might have to do an emergency Zoom schedule.
It's funny that you say that because I thought you were the host for this evening. And then I went to check to see if it was a webinar or a meeting and if I had to register. I realized I was the host. I'm like, oh, I better log in.
I know. I thought you're the one that set this up, or it comes in through your name.
Yeah,
when it gets set up.
Sue helped coordinate it. So
Okay.
I didn't realize that I had been selected as the host, but I didn't intend to be here.
I didn't either, so thank you very much. And thanks for joining. I don't know if I was really expecting you tonight, but it's a good thing.
Happy to be here.
It's like you don't have anything else to do in your evenings, huh?
Well, I'm glad that you're worried about me getting bored.
I don't think that's possible.
No, I don't see.
Not with Adam in the house. No.
Not. So Joel, I do know that Christine sent some information to you and was compiling some summary information on staffing, the historical piece. And I want to let you know that I've been working on the FY 21 to 22 budget comparison.
Yep.
So we have the data pulled and reconciled for FY 21, and I'm working on pulling in the FY 22 piece so that we can do a position to position comparison.
This is your position control code going backwards now. I apologize for making you do that or having you do that, but
Yeah.
So the only person I got can't make it was Dan.
Okay.
So
I hope everyone remembers and not just thinking about Monday.
I can resend. Oh, you got.
everybody should get like it was set up to do a reminder the day before. Hey, Mark.
Okay.
Hello. We get a lot of invitations for these meetings. Sometimes,
Yes,
you know,
two different ones, the webinar version and then the regular.
Yeah, Michelle, with
listener only.
Yeah, with all the school board meetings, well, it seems like that we aren't getting the regular webinar invitations anymore. We were getting like the panelist and the webinar invitations for everything, and it was like so confusing.
Yeah, so there are two setups in Zoom. There's the regular meeting, in which case you would get just a calendar invite with the link to Zoom, the Zoom meeting. And then there's the webinar, and with the webinar, you'll get both a calendar invite, and then you'll get a separate panelist invite. And the panelist invite allows you to get into the meeting as a panelist to be able to participate in the dialogue. So, and the panelist invite is specific to you. So it can't really be sent to someone else to let them in. And with the webinar, other participants that would like to attend can register to attend, and then they get pre-approved prior to the meeting.
Mark, good question on the vehicles.
yeah, that was
I'm not sure they're covered under the same school board policy.
Howard's question. But it is a good one, so we'll see.
Well, if they're not covered under the policy, they need to be covered under the policy.
I need to go. I just saw that, so I need to go look at the policy and see if it just talks about school buses or all transportation.
Well, you have a couple of different policies. You have the one that covers the bus, but you also have ones that covers transportation.
So Howard, did you get a chance to look at the PowerPoint presentation that I added in athletics page to, by any chance?
Yes, I looked at it just prior to to logging on. The only thing that was not on there was the amount, but we can figure that out too. Hey, Michelle. I had a couple questions and you never got back to me. Pim had forwarded my questions. The increases in the athletic department's health insurance and the retirement, is that all for one person?
I can check on that. Did you get a chance to add them to the questions form?
No, I didn't know how to do that.
Okay.
I'm running behind the 8 ball because I tried to get on like for 2 weeks and never could get on to the budget. And finally, Jeannie gave me her login.
Okay. I did see that initially you had an issue with your email and then we had resolved that. So I thought that you had access, that you were all set with access to the budget file at that time, because that was quite a ways back.
It's 6:06. Good evening.
Sorry. And well, I did have problems with the email account, but I also had problems when I logged on to the Docs, Google Docs, that it would not let me get onto anything except if I wanted to add an extra page. But I didn't want to add anything. I wanted to get into access for the budget and everything else, which I could never do. I can do it now, but before it was not working.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Folks, how we doing?
Good.
Hey, Mike, who sets the salary for the assistant athletic director?
We don't have an assistant athletic director. We have an administrative assistant to the athletic director.
Well, they have her listed as the assistant AD.
Oh, they do. That's a poor job title. And so, however, we are interested in eventually having a more of a true assistant athletic director that can split some of the responsibilities. And I think that would probably be a joint effort of myself, the BA and the superintendent to determine the appropriate salary for that.
Is that in addition to the assistant?
No, I would not be in addition to, it would be in replace of, evolve the position to be more practical for the needs of Souhegan.
So
Are you
who's
doing
that?
that this year?
Easy, Stephanie. I have not decided if I'm doing that this year. Okay. There's a lot of things happening, as you
Yeah.
know.
Who set the 4% raise for her?
I was not involved in that.
Okay, sent out a few text messages, so hopefully we'll get a couple responses back and we'll get some folks to join. But what I wanted to do today is really just go through, and I sent an agenda out. I don't think we have a quorum yet, so we can't talk about the meeting minutes.
Right?
Right? We got 4 sets of them we could approve, but we can't. So we're gonna have to push those off to another meeting. I can't see if there's anybody else sitting in a waiting room or anything, Michelle. I don't know if you can, if there's any public participation.
Let me double check.
Jeannie Lute's sitting in the, as an attendee, not as a panelist.
Which means we can't see her, but she can hear us. Hi, Jeannie.
I just promoted her.
There you go.
And I'll make, Joel, I'll make you, let's see, I think I can make you a host, co-host as well.
There she is.
Thank you. I was struggling, trying to get anybody's attention.
So what do we have? We have 1, 2, 3. We only have 4 members. What's our quorum for this group? Stephanie, you're ex officio, right? So that means you don't vote.
How many do you have, Joel, in the group total?
9.
Is it 5?
Including-
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Yeah, there's one.
There's Charlie.
And I'm not sure what we do about the alternates, to be honest with you, because we have an alternate.
I believe you only have 7 actual
Members.
members, right? And then you
7
have-
regular members.
Right.
So if you have the 7, it would be just like the school board, you'd have to have 4.
Right.
And we now have 4. 5. We have Jeannie. Okay, so I think we're good.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask this. So let me call the meeting to order. It is 6:12 p.m. Meeting of the Souhegan Advisory Finance Committee. I circulated an agenda. Just wanted to go through that. So we've called the meeting to order. We have minutes. If folks have had an opportunity to look at them, Peggy has made the adjustments to the minutes as people had commented on them. There's a package of 4 of them from September 16th, November 17th, November 20th, and November 23rd. And I'd accept a motion to approve the minutes.
All of them?
I would do it as a package unless you have anything that you want to pull.
No, I don't.
Okay, so Mark, can I take that as a motion?
I so moved, yes.
Okay, and Howard, would you like to second that motion?
Second the emotion.
Okay, is there any opposition to the minutes? I'll do it in the negative. Any opposition to the minutes? Does anybody need to register an abstention? Hearing none, seeing none, the minutes are approved, the package of 4 minutes. I have to take notes because Peggy's not here. Okay, let's, again, I don't see if there's anybody else that's listening in or looking in from a public participation standpoint. Michelle, can you check on that one more time? And we'll do that before the meeting concludes. So there's no public participation in this one. And then the next one on the agenda is just to review the report to the board. And I'm looking for really a couple things. One is to discuss the areas of concern that we have with the proposed budget. We've kind of had the observations that I discussed at the board meeting the other day. And then what I'd like to be able to do is have folks think about what items that they want to earmark for a more fulsome discussion at the December 7th joint budget workshop. And that's really the objective of what we're trying to accomplish today. If you want, I can share my screen which has the report in it, if that works for folks.
Sure.
Easier said than done here. Mark? Because I can't find the open file. Got it. Okay. Okay, so are you looking at the same thing I am?
Athletics financial summary.
Okay, yep. So I'm in the right document. Okay, so this was the presentation that we gave to the board. I added two sections to it, the athletics section and filled out a little more on the facilities side. And maybe what I think is important is, does this tee up the budget the right way? Does it, are we missing something? So, really looking for any input anybody has on even how the presentation works and whether it does what we need it to do.
Well, the enrollment forecasts are always tricky, but looking at this, I mean, that's going to jump off the page. When people see this, we know, or we can speculate on the reasons why, that the budgeted amount for this year was way off from the actual. Okay, we know why that is. The assumption on this is that we're going to be right back to the forecast here for 733 and are budgeting accordingly. What level of confidence is there that that's really going to get back to the budgeted number for this school year? I think that's going to be questioned.
That's the question, right?
Yeah.
And I know we go. I guess took it out. I thought I had a separate enrollment chart in here, but I guess not.
You want us to tell you about mistakes in here while you're there, or you want to just have us mail them to you?
If it's an easy one, sure.
Well, go up one screen.
Oh yeah, Mount Vernon's not with the U.
Change that.
And
Oh,
I got that one already today. And Pim's last name is spelled wrong in here as well. It's
Yeah.
STRA. Yeah.
right.
So I've only been here for 30 years in this town. So what do I know? Right?
Yeah, you really have no excuse for that.
This is none whatsoever. Okay. Thank you. So what do you think?
Can I just add what I learned today from a marathon tutorial from Michelle?
Yeah.
Thank her greatly for spending some time with me to go over just some of the budget, the funding mechanisms more than anything. One of the things that she pointed out to me today is that because I've been so confused about how how there's a 10-year plan of repairing certain parts of the facility based on the on-site, in-site recommendations. And I was somehow under the impression that that was going to be funded by the building maintenance fund, but it is not. It's going to be funded by a capital reserve fund that was requested last year, and then an additional capital reserve amount of 163,000 this year that will go together to fund those items. So what it does is it sort of frees up that building maintenance fund, which is around $250,000 for other things, just to let you know that. The other thing that she told me, and this comes under the facilities piece, it's not budgeted and it's not really talked about, is what it will cost to raise, what amount of money you need to raise in order to replace the turf field. And apparently they've done a little more digging deep to come up with the fact that in order to replace it in 3 to 4 years, they would need to have $85,000 a year for the next 4 years. So it begs the question of whether the capital reserve request for 163,000 really needs to be, 85,000 might need to be added to that in order to start raising enough money to cover the turf field. Just wanted to share that with you all, and I think it ought to be part of the discussion about facilities.
So Jeannie, was that 85,000 for 4 years? That was the total cost that was going to cost? Because I was under the assumption the last couple of years we talked about it, it was going to be over $1 million.
Right, so Michelle, could you confirm that?
Sure, let me jump in on a couple of points if you don't mind. I do want to clarify that the building maintenance fund and the capital reserve for the on-site insight, they're two pockets of money, but they're in the same account. So they're both in the school maintenance expendable trust fund. So just to
Right.
clarify that piece.
Michelle, could you repeat that? You said there's 2 pockets of money.
Well, so people are thinking about them as 2 pockets of money. If you go to the budget file, there's a report in there on capital reserve and trust funds. And that report is dated as of September. So as of the October report, that document will show that the school maintenance fund, which is an expendable trust fund, currently has 351,000 around that in there. The 351,000 is 251 that the account started with, plus 100,000 that was raised this March. The 100,000 that was raised this March was raised to fund cost items that are in the on-site insight report, the 10-year capital maintenance plan. So it's, although they're 2 different or 2 pieces of the same account, they are in the same account. They're both in the expendable trust fund for the school maintenance. And the language that created that fund is in that document too. So you can see that it, identifies that the funds can be used for capital maintenance or capital improvements.
So it has the same language as what the original maintenance expendable trust fund has, that
Yeah.
it takes a school board, public meeting, and the authorization of the school board to use that money
Yes, to expend.
just for maintenance purposes.
No, for maintenance, the language, I'm looking here. Okay, give me just a second, see if I can grab the right one.
Is it all part of the same requirement? I mean, so this is a trust fund that might have, the way I kind of think about managing a trust fund is there might be different trusts within the bigger trust fund, which might have different restrictions on the use of funding. So
No,
this one-
That's
This
not
is-
the case with this.
Okay, so-
This is part of a larger fund that's managed by the town, but this one account is called the School Maintenance Fund. And it was established in March of 2005. And the language says, for the purpose of repairing and maintaining the school facilities and equipment and for capital improvements. So it
Right.
serves both those, any funds that go in there can be used for those purposes.
And do we share that with Amherst School District?
No, it
No.
is a Souhegan account,
Okay,
but it is
And so
managed
that-
by the town of Amherst trustee of trust funds.
right. And so the $100,000 that we got, that we raised as a warrant article went into this fund.
Yes,
And
Right.
and
wasn't the language that we proposed under that warrant article to be used just for the particular items in the
no,
one? No?
no, we talked about the background for raising the funds. It was to support the capital improvements, 10-year capital improvements plan.
Yeah.
But the dollars were raised to go in to the expendable trust fund, the school maintenance fund. And they're really the same purpose, if you will.
But when we set up that expendable trust fund, we used to put in like 65,000 per year with the idea that that money was going to sit there as kind of a rainy day thing. It was better to have money to fix something right away than have to ask the public to have some kind of a, money account to do this. So the way that we had set it up was that the expendable trust could be used for anything maintenance related, as long as it was the school board had a public meeting to announce that they were going to use it, and they had to have the authorization from the school board to use it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So now this is going to be kind of like the same thing. If the capital reserve and trust fund, if they have the same language that they can both use for different
So
things.
I guess I want to be clear, it's not two separate accounts. It's as if you set up a savings account so that you could put money aside because you might need to replace your windows at some point at your house, and then you decide to add money to that very same savings account because you think you're going to have to do a roof repair. It's that type of thing. We're simply putting money into the same account, which has the same purpose. It's for repair and maintenance and capital items for the building.
So
So,
the-
so let me ask you this, Michelle, when last year, when the $100,000 was requested, was it requested to be put into the building maintenance fund, or the school maintenance fund, whatever it's called, or was it
Yes.
requested as a separate capital reserve?
Nope.
Nope,
It was
It was
to go into the
requested
fund.
to go into the existing fund.
Okay,
And that's why I just wanted to clarify that, because I do hear people saying that there are two separate accounts. There really aren't. It's one account.
right.
But the basis for contributing to it kind of originated from two different thought patterns, if you will.
Yeah.
But we aren't relying on the $251,000 that was in the building maintenance fund prior to the $100,000 being added to it to fund the on-site, in-site projects. What we're doing is using $100,000 and then asking for another $163,000 to be added to that to fund the on-site, in-site.
That
Correct?
is exactly correct. You got it.
Yes.
Yay.
This is where I struggle every year, though, because I think, with our committee, we talked about the capital reserve fund. It's not part of the actual operating budget for the school. But I think the part that's always missing for us to review is this capital plan. Like, where is the 5, 10, 15-year capital plan for facilities so that we can see this money, right? And I think, Michelle, you and I talked about this last year where, all of a sudden there's no plan and then we need these huge repairs and we're dipping into this account, and then all of a sudden it's an emergency, we're going to the town for this extra money. I think at some point it'd be great as part of this to see the actual capital plan with the capital budget that can run parallel, if that makes sense.
That is the 10-year capital projects plan that's linked in the table of contents. It shows, and that's from the on-site, in-site plan. Now, that is a maintenance plan for items that have, a shelf life, your HVAC systems, your air handlers, mechanical type things and things of that nature in the building. That's not to be confused with Souhegan 2.0, which is
Right.
a bigger picture of the facility, or the projects that were carved out of Souhegan 2.0 that are now on this list for school board consideration, being the entry to the facility for security purposes, relooking at that, the locker room repairs, replacing the lockers, and the science lab upgrade, and now the turf field. Those projects that I just mentioned are not in the 10-year on-site insight report, not in the FY22 budget, and carved out of Souhegan 2.0.
Okay.
So it's just additional priorities that get added to the list
Correct.
as time goes on.
Right, which will happen from time to time. There may be things that come up that either we thought were going to have a longer useful life than they do, or new needs that get identified and therefore may need to be added to the list, somewhere in the list.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, there was a conversation at one point, and I might be just mixing apples and oranges here, but unless we had asked for something specifically or it was line itemed in the school budget, we couldn't spend it if there was a under spend in one part of the budget. We just couldn't go do something else because we hadn't put it in the budget for pre-approval by the town, or something to that effect. I'm not exactly sure if I have it right.
You do have it right, and it is a bit confusing. So I'll try to clarify it. If you recall, when we budget in the budget system, we have an account number. And a segment of that account number is called the function code. And the function code identifies the category of expenditure in a very broad way. So it identifies regular ed, special ed, general administration, facility type items, things of that nature. So this lovely document, which is called the MS-26, when we get to the point of the deliberative, this has to be posted before the deliberative so that the community can see those broad categories that we have a plan budgetarily for next year's budget. If we don't budget anything in a particular function code, then you can't transfer money into that function code for that purpose because you've not noticed the public that you might have a need in that area. And a good example is, let's look at building acquisition and construction. That code number is 4500. If there's a dollar budgeted in that line, then the board has the authority to transfer money into that line for construction purposes throughout the fiscal year if the budget's approved. If there's nothing budgeted in that line, then we've not noticed the public that there might be an expenditure in that category. So the board does not have the authority to transfer money into a construction category, meaning that if there are the larger scale construction needs, you can't move forward with them in that fiscal year. So did that make things more confusing or did that help to clarify it?
I was looking at your MS-26 report that went last year, and I
Yeah.
see exactly how you did that. And we do have lots of zero lined.
Right. And in most cases, that makes sense, like site acquisition. That's probably going to be part of a much larger warrant article that would be specific to that
Yeah.
category. Site improvement, you can see last year. Am I looking at the Souhegan one? No, I'm
All
looking at the Pembroke
zeros.
one.
Yep.
But when you get down to like, building improvements, services, facility acquisition and construction, in most fiscal years, you're not going to budget in your operating budget for facility acquisition and construction. You're going to have a separate warrant article for
Right.
that. But construction
Well, for example, there was zero budgeted for the community service programs.
Yeah.
That sounds unusual somehow. I'm not sure why.
No, well, those would be, fall in the category of like adult ed.
Yep, there's an adult ed continuing education program. So this school district does not budget anything for that. If I was at
Right.
Amherst at the Amherst School District, would what's that Makerspace program be? No, part of that? No.
No, because that's not a school budget item. But,
That's run by the rec department.
right.
In the school.
It's
Mhm.
run in the school, but it's not a school program. It's run by and it's kind of like if the Boy Scouts ran a program in the building.
Fair enough. Okay. Okay. But
there's
nothing that
some
we have in
items-
this 10-year capital plan is going to be at risk because it hasn't been put into a budget line item.
No, because the 10-year capital plan is an expendable trust fund, and it has a specific purpose. So the board has the authority to spend the money for that specific purpose after a hearing with the public. Then they can move forward with that. So that gives them the authority if they needed to do a minor renovation because there was a concern with the facility. As long as it meets the criteria of that capital reserve fund, they can do
Got it.
it.
So they could do the facade
Correct.
project if they wanted to, or the front building, the security project, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, so long and the short that I came out of this is we still have no plan to replace the turf field.
Well, we do have more information on the turf field. Roger was able to take there, and I've put some information in the table of contents too, in the budget file, just so that folks have access to that. There's the turf field closeout manual that was provided in 2016. So that gives you some information about the life cycle of the turf. And then there was let's see, we had previously had the athletic user fee and turf fee in there, that information as well. So there is some revenue being generated to offset that cost, but it's not going to be at the level that's going to be needed really to replace the turf. When Roger reached out to the folks that had been involved in installing the turf, we were informed that it probably has another 3 to 4 years of useful life. We need to maintain it based on the closeout manual telling us how to maintain it. And that will, extend the life for those 3 to 4 years. And then they said it's about $3 to $4 a square foot to replace it. And that would turn out to be about $340,000 based on the square footage of that area. I know that folks had heard $1 million number in the past, but this is what Roger was given as information most recently. So that's good news to me. We'll be doing, impact studies on the turf and whatnot. But this is what I have to date as to where we stand right now with the cost estimate for that.
So the $85,000 a year for the next 4 years does not include using any of the $251,000 that's currently in the account.
That would be
Correct.
correct.
Well, you can
So-
use year-end money, right?
Well, that's a very good question, Howard. The challenge with year-end money is that there's two things. If at the end of the year, you want to spend the money prior to June 30th, then the board has a latitude to do that. If you want to carry the money over, we do not have the authority to do that per RSA without voter approval. And the way you get voter approval is by putting it on the ballot and asking them to put it into a reserve account.
So the warrant article that would go along with this issue would be, to the extent there is something left over in the overall school budget, can we take it from anywhere in the school budget
Yep.
to the extent there is surplus money in the school budget at the end of the fiscal year, the voters would request that, up to 50,000 or up to 85,000 of that gets added to the capital maintenance account earmarked for replacement of the turf field at Souhegan High School.
Yep, you can do something exactly like that.
And if you did it that way, would it go into the capital reserve and trust fund earmarked, or as soon as it goes in there, that would be a condition of how the money went in, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it's a condition of how you word, the article, the warrant
Okay.
article.
And
So-
the fact that, I'm sorry, Jeannie. The fact
Well,
that you could just put down exactly how much money you wanted to put into it at the end of the year from the year-end surplus, as long as you had some kind of a fund, it doesn't necessarily have to be the 85,000. So say this year we have 400,000 in the year-end surplus, we could put 100,000 in.
The warrant article has to be specific in the sense that you have to identify what they call a sum certain. You can say up to, so it can be crafted to say put up to 100,000. And then what happens is if you only had 50,000, then that's all that goes in. If you had 400,000, 100,000 goes in. So if you say an actual amount, let's say we said 100,000, and I'm just throwing out these numbers, right? They're not really based in any fact, just for example. So let's say we said we wanted to put 100,000 of the fund balance. If you only had 75,000 at the end of the year, then you end up putting nothing. Because if it's an exact amount, it's either all of it or it's none of it.
Right. So my question to the finance committee is, should we take some position on whether we support beginning to raise money to replace the turf field? I mean, because it's not really part of the current budget, but it has to do with planning ahead and facilities. And I just wonder if we as a finance committee should raise that issue to the board.
That would be on a separate warrant article, correct?
Right.
To add to this fund. So we could certainly recommend adding the article, and then of course we take a vote on the article as a committee.
Right.
Wrong with that.
And how is added could either be adding it to the 163,000 that's already proposed to go into the fund,
Right.
or calling it out as a separate individual article that would stand on its own at, asking to put an additional 85,000.
And you also have other money coming in because you have the user fee, the fee to use the field, that could be put in that same account. Or is that being held in a different account?
That's
Yeah.
being held in a different account.
Do we know the balance of that account?
I think it's on that same report. So let me
Is
open
it?
it up again.
I think it's around
Can-
40,000, something
Yeah,
like
I
that.
think you're right, Jeannie.
Can-
So-
Can I make a potential suggestion? I like the idea of making the potential 85,000 or whatever dollar amount you want to suggest as a separate warrant article, because there are enough people out there who were upset over the turf field potentially having to fund the replacement. And if we lump that dollar amount in with the funding of the $163,000, it could easily all get turned down. Where if they're two separate articles, people at least have a choice.
I totally agree with you, Stephanie, because when I was the board chair and I stood up in front of the audience and told them that field was not going to cost us anything more after we had put it in. And now I feel like we're going back on that and we're not going to do that. So I'd say having some kind of an article that reads something to the effect, shall the Souhegan Cooperative School District raise and appropriate up to a certain amount from the year-end unassigned fund balance, if it's available, on June 30th of that year, to be added to the whatever fund we create. And that way we'd always have that fund to fall back on if we do not raise any more money from user fee.
I would need to check, but I think you could have it designated to go into the fund that the user fees are going into, but I would want to confirm that. That fund is called the Recreation Revolving Fund. And it says that the funds may be expended only for the recreation purposes, including installation, replacement, and maintenance of a synthetic turf field. Now that means the turf field's included, but it's not the only thing that those funds would be used for. It's one of the items that's specifically called out from that fund.
But I
And
think
that
the
fund-
difference, Michelle, is that if you put it in a trust, the school board has to have a recommendation from the maintenance trust coordinator, and then they have to post a public hearing and formal vote. So if they use it in that way that you just said, I don't think they'd have to have that requirement.
I believe that's correct.
That revolving account, is that more like a checking account sitting at a bank?
It is,
Kind of like, more, yeah.
Well,
It's a revolving account.
it's a revolving account.
Yeah.
It operates more like I want to say like a little
Restricted-
mini business, if you
a
will.
restricted
Right.
liability account.
Mhm.
So Howard, this is the dilemma that the board is going to have, is because there are, the Souhegan 2.0 projects that are being considered, which could potentially be either put in the budget, some of them, or pulled out as separate warrant articles for the voters to vote on. So what we could potentially have is a lot of warrant articles. That's the only concern that I have. And the town is famous for doing that, pulling out,
Yeah, but, when we were on the board together, we took pride in the fact that we did not put a lot of warrant articles.
Absolutely. And so that's my preference would be, especially in terms of the lockers, that those get somehow blended into the budgets, because they fall into the category. If you all saw the videos today of the lockers, hopefully you saw how bad they are, especially in the boys' locker room. And I think we are justified, or I would think the board would be justified in including that in the maintenance budget under facilities. But as just one less warrant article is what I'm thinking, because they're going to be, who knows what the board is going to do about any of these things. But
Stephanie does. She's a board member.
yeah, Stephanie.
But I don't know what we're doing about it. I have my own opinion, but we haven't talked about it yet as a board, so.
Is there a grand, and Mike, maybe you know this answer, is there like the big picture ask of all these things that we've talked about? Has it been scheduled out yet, or is that what we're still trying to figure out?
I would say that we're trying to determine, how to go about this. For me, you get you get things kind of operating as silos right now. You got different groups that are working on certain projects and certain issues, and some of them are overlapping and some of them are not overlapping. And then some of our issues are, relying on other issues, with the other schools, with their facility projects and their renovation projects that are happening. And for me, there should be a plan, and I've talked about this with Michelle a little bit. There should be things that are timelined out, that are, the work is connected, and not just facility work, but what's driving the facility work is the strategic vision of the district, and then how Souhegan High School interprets that strategic vision of the district and applies it to their school and to our school. Obviously Freudian slip, you're still a third party here, as it applies to the school. And we need to make sure that we're doing a better job of that, because I think that would clear it up. And the other piece is, I think the school administration can do a better job overall of communicating with the different organizations like you guys, the Joint Facilities Committee, the school boards, And that's something I'm still kind of finagling out how to use the processes and the structures of the district and the school to be able to do that. Because people are talking about the same things, Joel, you know, in a lot of these meetings, they're overlapping. And,
Yep.
and it's going to be our responsibility to, you know, provide the different groups with information so they can give us guidance on things, because that's the roles of the different things, the different boards and the different groups. So yeah, that work is in process, and I keep telling people, and Michelle and maybe Stephanie has heard this before, like we can accelerate it. It just, as long as the different groups support the work, like you guys support the work, the board supports the work of the building administration, JFAC supports the work, we can move quicker, right? You know what I mean? Then maybe Souhegan and SAU 39 have moved in the past. And I think that can definitely be improved. And so the answer is yes, and we're working on it. And I think I agree with some things, that some things are more pressing than others. But before I give my like official, like, hey, here's what I think, I want to make sure I do my due diligence and listen to the different groups, and then I can take that and make recommendations to you guys and other groups based on hearing it all, and then from in my role and capacity as principal, you know, give you that information. And I want people to believe it. That's the other piece. When you say it, like, here's my professional opinion based on where I'm coming from. And I think that's another piece that needs to be worked on as well, you know. And so that's kind of where I'm at. Like, a lot of things that I hear in these meetings, Joel, I don't disagree with. Like the questions, you know, you were asking, and Howard, I heard you talking about earlier, I don't disagree with what you're saying. Like, and Jeannie not pulling a lot of warrant articles on it. Like, I think that's good business not to do those things. And if we're planning it, we don't have to, right? And so, you know, I'm with you, and I just got to work on it. But I think we can do it quick. So we're in this spot next year. It makes a lot more sense.
Hopefully, Michael, when you guys develop the plans, what I keep seeing over the last 15 years being on budget and school boards is that we reinvent the wheel every time that a new administration takes over or a new school board takes over. We change the way that we're doing something, and then we have to start from day one again. So, you know, 15 years ago, we had what we called the Gale report, where they took an intensive look at the building and they developed a plan of what we wanted to do. And over the years, I've seen that change, and it's because of the changing of the administration, the school boards, et cetera. So what we need to do is whatever we do, whatever plan we develop, we need to make sure that it goes forward along the same lines, no matter who's in charge or you know, who's a member of the school board.
That's a tall ask, Howard. That's the whole purpose of getting on a school board and making change, if that's the direction that you want to take. But
yes,
but I mean, what I
There
would
should be some
agree is,
guiding principles, though, and at least some sort of master plan that everybody is, you know, working through.
right.
No,
So let me ask you different.
I agree.
Michael, let me ask you a different question, going backwards a little bit, because the school board votes on this at the end of December, correct? On this budget?
December 21st.
And this goes in front of the voters in
January
or February.
The public session's January, deliberatives February.
Okay, so everything has to come together by the end of this month then. Okay.
I have to say, I like that.
I thought we had another month in there.
Yeah, I like that you're tackling the idea of the field budget and bringing that up before the board. I think it's good for them to hear that you've looked into it and have some suggestions.
Good.
And I think you were the good business. I can just tell you is, when you have the budget you have, and then you ask for user fees, and then you're going to go ask for a warrant article on top of that, that does not sit well with anybody. You know, I can tell you that does not sit well internally with administration. And Michelle has heard me say this. That does not sit well. We have to figure out a better way, because even in some of the most, I was at in many different places where sports are a priority, that still would not fly. You know what I mean? That just still wouldn't fly. It wouldn't pass the litmus test. So we have to figure something out. So I'm interested in that revolving account, Michelle. I'll
That
just
sounds
tell you
like-
on how that works, you
And
know?
It sounds
And,
like Kelly, it sounds like Kelly has some good ideas too.
she does. I think, you know, she's been a very much a pleasant surprise in her transition from being a teacher and a coach into administration. And so I think between her and I and our thoughts and Michelle's efforts with us, you know, we're very similar on how we want to approach some things and work through. But there's some systems we have to and processes that we have to go through to do that. You know, and working with the board and the other people too.
If you haven't had a chance to review her report on the athletic and the turf fees, she has information that's very interesting in that report and kind of gives a lot of background on the structure of the fees, the balance in the accounts, and her thoughts around some of the lighter activities that might bring in some revenue for the turf field. But certainly she's not a capital fundraiser, you know, to generate $340,000 worth of revenue to cover, you know, the cost of a turf field. I mean, there are people that make their entire career about just doing that type of fundraising. So,
Nor should she have that responsibility as far as I'm concerned. I really don't think that's the place of the athletic director to be raising money for a
I would
turf
agree.
field that was
So-
supposed to have been,
Is this the one you're talking about? This report? I don't know if you can see this one on my screen. Oh, I'm not sharing it anymore.
where is that report, Michelle?
If you
On
go
the
in the
table-
index,
yeah, go to the table of contents and then it's on line 34, says athletic user and turf fee review. And she and I are meeting, I think it's tomorrow. The days are blending, bear with me. But she and I are meeting to talk about the fees and as we would propose for FY22.
So are these the fees for students to pay to participate in these sports? Are these fees that the different sports are paying
No,
to
these
use
are,
the fields?
these are, I think there's us both in there, but this is the cost for a participant to, it's a sort of pay for play scenario.
mhm.
So are
Is
those
that-
being
is that going
in,
into that account? I thought the user fees were going into our budget, and the user fees we're talking about to replace the turf field are the ones where people rent our field.
There are two different scenarios. So there's we
Yeah.
were asked to gather information about the athletic fees. You're correct, Stephanie, that's one set. And then there's the turf
Yeah.
fee.
The renter fee.
Yeah.
See, when we said, when they built that field, there wasn't hardly any other turf fields around. So we thought that we would have, you know, a big supply of people wanting to use our field for events. But at the same time, after we got done with ours, Milford put one in, Bedford already had one in, and a lot of other schools started
that's
putting in turf fields. So our supply went down the drain. So now we have two big fields, two big tournaments that supply us with some money, but this year they didn't have them because of the COVID. So
Right.
we're kind of caught behind the 8 ball.
And one of the strategies, a lot of schools that have, you know, a turf field or multiple turf fields, and they explore, and this is more of a long-term thing. So, you know, but third-party funding, you know, from grants or other organizations that will sponsor, you know, so either grants or people that will sponsor your school. And there's ways around that. And Kelly and I have had some preliminary conversations about that. And I've been part of that type of work at a low level, you know, but there's a lot, you know, like Michelle said, there's people who above that, like, you know, that's their job to do that. You know what I mean? And, but that is a strategy that schools use, you know, because we're not the only school that has, Howard has made that promise, like, hey, stood up in front of the townspeople, like, hey, it's going to pay for itself because we're going to do all these things. And then 7 years in, you're realizing people aren't using it, and it's, the price to maintain it has increased, and so it's a common problem. We're not alone in that, so.
So Joel, that slide that you showed just now, was that you, Joel, that put that together?
The turf fee funding
Ye-
thing?
Well, there was a slide that had various funding mechanisms on it. That you just put up. Is that one you just prepared?
No, that was, Michelle had that one. That was in
Oh, that was
the,
Michelle's?
that was the
Yep.
link in the budget document.
Kelly supplied that for the athletic.
No. I'm talking about the slide in our presentation.
Oh, yeah, I was just typing it as we were doing it.
It looked great. Whatever you did looked great. I just wanted to let you know.
Okay, let me put it back up then.
I mean, I don't know if it needs a little tweaking, but
It needs tweaking.
right. But it was a good compilation of
Yeah,
what
so
we just
the-
talked about.
Right, so this was Howard's original slide, and we just talked about the field yields about $12,000 to $15,000 a year in revenue. Expected to cost to replace the field is 340. That's I guess I would call it preliminary. That might just be the square foot of the material. Then they're going to charge you labor to put it in, which would require 85,000 a year for the next 4 years. So that's, and then what I figured is we can talk about the issue associated with the maintenance, the school maintenance expendable trust. And I don't know where this section necessarily goes, but the question relating to the field is really this one.
Yeah.
That we're seeing that it's not really accounted for in a long-term plan yet. And that's what we want to bring to folks' attention.
So I still am confused as to whether the turf field falls in the category of facilities or, maintenance of it and replacement of it, or is it under athletics?
Jeannie, we're not siloed like people here. We're a team. So we're gonna move this right up into the front and the recommendations up there.
I just don't know. I think they overlap.
We'll
Clearly.
call it an overlap.
Yeah.
They do overlap, but interestingly enough, I think the timing really is good to, have a conversation about this now, because you do have 3 to 4 years before it really needs to be replaced. And so there is some time to establish a plan that's manageable that will support the cost when the work needs to be done.
I like Howard and others are just concerned that it's going to be a tough sell.
Yeah.
That's the only thing, because people bought into it with the presumption that we were never going to have to spend another dime on it to replace it. So,
And I can certainly appreciate that. I understand the concern that might generate.
but it also, maybe if we can explain what happened, that you project a certain amount to be raised every year, and it didn't turn out to be that way. And now we're trying to be forward thinking and plan ahead and save. So.
And as we, Jeannie, you and I had talked earlier today, even though it is still a lot of money, $85,000 a year is a little more manageable than waiting to the end point and requesting 340 or what, the full amount in 1 year.
Right.
And there's nothing that says that after 3 or 4 years that we can't get another 3 or 4 more years on top of that out of that field.
That is absolutely true.
I mean, you look at the track that we had to replace, and we kept going to this, every year we kept saying that we need to replace that. It finally got to the point where it was a safety problem. That's the reason why it got changed. But, that kept going every year. So maybe we can get more than just 3 or 4 years out of it.
Yeah, it is the type of thing that, as I had indicated earlier, Roger will be scheduling, impact studies for the turf field. We do want to stay within the parameters of having that field be a safe environment and monitoring that. But you're absolutely right, Howard, that, the conditions might be such that we get 5 years out of it or 6 years out of it. I mean, I really can't say, but they're estimating 3 to 4 at this point.
Okay. Hey, Gina, do you want to talk about the other, the slides that have to do with your, with the facilities report, which you took some issue with on how I cut a whole bunch of your stuff out?
Joel,
I'm good
I-
with that.
I know. I know. I was just concerned that my recommendations were missing because I'm still rethinking all of this because I'm just trying to find other ways to fund this without asking for more from the voters. And I really felt sort of strongly that there's one place that shouldn't decrease in the budget, and that's facilities, because now we're at a point where we have so much that is becoming critical to replace and repair that it just didn't make sense to me to have a budget where there was a 9% decrease. I mean, the thing about, I know enrollment drives a lot of stuff, but no matter what, we have to maintain the facilities, whether we have 5 less or 5 more kids. We still have, to have an infrastructure that works. And so my thought was that we, because there was a sort of a windfall in the facilities budget because a bond was expiring. Our bond obligation was expiring to the tune of $150,000 or so, more than that really. But it meant that the budget decreased $146,977 because of that bond. And so I thought maybe it might be a good idea to put it back in and actually use it, to fund some of those projects. I mean, right now we're going to have to ask for $163,000. Maybe we don't have to ask for that much if we put back 146,000 into the facilities budget. I don't know. It was just a thought, and I thought it was worth at least discussing. I know people hate to have a budget, where you get rid of a decrease. I mean, everybody loves for a budget to go down, but I just felt like it was prudent to make sure that we were able to fund a lot of the critical elements right now in facilities.
Jeannie, I agree with you. And I think I said this last time. I think, the issue with facilities is, square footage is square footage. It doesn't change. The number of students could decrease, but the building has the same number of air filters, the same number of bathrooms, everything's the same. Maybe usage might be down. But I think, it would be prudent to come in with a decrease. I mean, I think keeping it flat. I think one of my concerns with this budget is, the assumption that COVID is going to be gone by next year. I think there's so much optimism, which is great. But I mean, I think, sanitation, I think the staffing was even a decrease. What about those air filter changes, your sanitation stations, everything else?
Right.
We don't want to go back and ask for this later. And the facilities, everybody knows. I mean, the town knows the facilities are lacking. I mean, though the capital projects are separate, the lockers and everything else can't be in this number. I still don't understand how the decrease is really there.
Thanks, Charlie.
Appreciate
that.
Is the decrease, well, the bond, the expiring bond, I think that was $100,000.
Was 150,000. Michelle, there was more to that, right?
Yeah, the principal and the interest, but can go look at the amount.
Right.
because I looked at that and I said, it looked more like a 40, yeah, around a $47,000 decrease is when I was first thinking about it. And the question I have is how much of it is actually now getting picked up in some of these other items that we've been talking about? And I don't know if there was an overlap there or there's, something, because there's not a change. There wasn't a change in staffing, right? I'm not suggesting that it's not a bad idea, Jeannie.
Right, right. You just want to understand it. Yeah,
Right.
I get you.
Because custodial salaries are 2%. I mean, it's really small.
Yeah.
But it's still a reduction, right? And I guess what's the plan for that?
I
'Cause
guess if you don't mind if I could jump in for a minute. Joel, do you mind if I comment on the?
Oh, please do.
If you look at, I'm in the Advisory Finance Committee lookup number 1. And if you look at the FY21 budget, the FY21 budget includes the $100,000 that was raised to go to the expendable trust fund. So if you were going to compare apples to apples, you would you'd either have to remove that 100,000 from the FY21 budget, or say we're proposing 163,000 in the FY22 budget, but it's a separate warrant article. Once the warrant article gets approved, it gets rolled into the budget. So it does create a little bit of apples and oranges comparison there. So there's that variance, which makes the budget look like it's going down 100,000, but it's really not. It would be going up another 63,000 if the 163,000 gets approved. And then there's also the principal on the bond and the interest on the bond, which that is a true decrease because there isn't an additional payment. So that is about 160,000 in and of itself as a decrease from one year to the next. So if the total budget is going down 148,000-ish, if I recall from the worksheet, then there are increases already in other lines, because by definition, when I add up these 3 lines, I've got what is it total here? $259,000 decrease from one year to the next.
So there's a net $100,000 increase year over year? Because this number up here, the difference is 146,000 less, but you don't have this recurring 259,000.
Right, if you kind of take that out. Now, one of the ways that you can use that information to support the warrant article of 163,000 is that you say there's a decrease in the facility section of the budget, and we're asking for those funds to be put into a reserve fund instead, that 163,000. Jeannie, I do recall you saying that perhaps we could forego the warrant article of 163,000 and put that money in the budget. The challenge with that is that 163 is going to fund some items that may be needed to be completed in FY22, but also they might not be needed until FY23. And some of that money is also going towards items that are later in the 10-year plan. So if we try to put it all in the budget, we might not need it, and then it's going to be gone at the end of the fiscal year. So it really, the 163 really does need to go into a savings account, if you will, if it's going to fund the 10-year plan in the way that has been proposed.
Got it.
And is the only way to do that through the warrant article? You can't put that in the budget with a transfer account?
No, the law per statute, there are certain conditions and restrictions on the school board's authority to retain money, and there's a mechanism set up to do that, and it must be approved by the voters, and in most cases, with different types of warrant articles that allow you to put money into either an expendable trust fund, a capital reserve fund, things of that nature.
So is that one of those cases, Michelle, where you could word it such that if there were a certain amount left at the year end, that it could be spent in the surplus or whatever, that it could be spent towards X?
No, it has to be, in order to go from one year to the next, it has to be put into a fund.
Okay,
Because your budget is your budget. So when you get into, the minute June 30th hits, July 1 starts, you're in a whole new budget year. It's either coming out of the budget or it's not. And the only way to have funds above and beyond the budget is to have them in a reserve fund.
So if we remove the risk though from 22 and put in this reserve, we're going to put everything into this warrant article and that gets, denied. What happens to the repairs to the building at that point? There's nothing extra in this budget at this point.
Yeah, if you mean, is there room in the budget to just absorb those items? Not really, but there are always changes from one year to the next. And, there may be circumstances where as we get into next year, we may find that we have savings in some areas. That's why at the end of each year, we've sort of started a process where the board looks at what the unanticipated fund balance unassigned fund balance might be at the end of the year. And then they have the authority within some parameters to determine if they want to spend some of that money on projects that weren't specifically called out in the budget, but still meet the criteria of falling within the budgetary authority of the board. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah. I think I just still concerned for this area. I think it's such a need that, there's definitely risk by removing everything.
Yeah, I think.
Can I go back a second? Because I'm still confused. I see this as almost a net increase in the facilities budget by $100,000.
So if we were to if you were to add up all the amounts, excluding lines 89, 90, and 91, if I add up the increase and the decrease, that tells me that the other line items in total go up 112,000.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying earlier.
So it's a 7.5% increase year over year, but for, I don't know if you guys can still see the screen, but for these
Right.
items right here.
absolutely. Yep.
So that feels reasonable.
But if the bond payment wasn't ending, then that would be part of this budget, and therefore we wouldn't have a decrease. We
Well,
would
but
have
then you
an
would have to,
increase.
then instead of repaying the principal on the bond, you'd have to find $155,000 of projects to spend it on. A very different use of funds.
Right, but we can certainly find $155,000
We have a
worth of
10-year capital
projects.
plan. Yep, I'm not disagreeing with you on that, Jeannie.
Well, the other thing that I was wondering is, we've talked, well, we haven't talked, I've talked about putting the lockers into the budget of $75,000. Is that a possibility to at least reduce that decrease by what, $70,000? I mean, that's possible, right, Michelle, to add it to the budget?
It's certainly possible. It would be the decision of the finance committee to, whether or not they're going to recommend that to the board, and then up to the board as to whether or not they want to include that in the budget. But that is absolutely an option.
Okay.
If we'd be able to talk about that Monday night, that would be good.
Is that a fair statement? I might have my numbers a little off at this point, but
Yeah, I think so. Let me look at I didn't do the math for the.
I didn't do the
total
math for
budget
the
increase,
percent
but-
yet, but. Yeah, 7.8, 7.9.
Yeah, the change of 112,000-ish is
Hmm.
accurate.
Yeah, that's, yeah. So the other thing that, you know, that you didn't put in my slides was
You can edit them yourself, you know.
was the fact that Roger had calculated a certain amount that in anticipation of things that may go wrong. I think it was $44,000 that he had calculated 20 cents per square foot or something that he wanted as a cushion because there wasn't something like that in the budget.
I didn't understand. I apologize for that. I didn't understand that. I thought he was just listing the projects that he had in his budget. So I wasn't
No.
sure if you were, so he has asks that that he wasn't able to include in the budget.
Well, no, these are things that he's, you know, that are unanticipated. You know, there's no way of knowing what's going to break, and we don't have anything really in there except maybe the building maintenance fund to cover those things. So he just really felt that the budget didn't allow him to adequately cover, you know, unknown circumstances.
And that's what that capital maintenance fund was always for. So if that's going to get changed for the usage, then the taxpayers do not love to hear there is a quote unquote almost a slush fund sitting somewhere.
Well, I
That
don't think
never
it's,
goes
I
over
don't think of
well.
it as a slush fund as much as he understands the magnitude of all the repairs and maintenance that need to be done. And right now it's basically a Band-Aid that he's putting on everything. And so this will give him the opportunity to replace valves or, you know, whatever that may go wrong with the whatever system. It's not a big overhaul. It's just.
What's the
Yeah.
dollar amount that he was talking about? Do you know?
44,000. 20 cents per square foot.
Yeah, if I could jump in. So first of all, if we do have questions for Roger, I can reach out to him and see if he can pop into the meeting. I did kind of give him a heads up.
Sure.
That, you know, there may be some questions, so I could send him a message. But I'm always sensitive to the terminology, and I don't want it to sound like there's a cushion in the budget, because there isn't a cushion in the budget. There's no fluff in the budget. There's no
Sorry,
slush fund in
sorry,
the
I didn't mean to
Michelle,
say
I
that.
thought that was your job to ensure that
Yeah.
there is.
I know, I'm on both sides of the spectrum here. So the budget has really been pared down, but what Roger has done is he's used sort of industry standards, and that as a guidance, is a guide to say, based on the square footage that we have, it's prudent to budget at least X per square foot for items that are going to need attention throughout the fiscal year. So has he been able to identify and project every single thing that's going to need to be repaired or replaced in next year? No, nobody has a crystal ball to do that, but there's enough data, if you will, in the industry to say, here's the typical and here's the norm. And so he's budgeted using that information.
Well, yeah,
so
for example, he has a budget for electrical supplies and repairs to building, and I'm just going through it, HVAC supplies. So that's all the stuff that goes in. I would assume that went into his $44,000 X amount per square foot estimate.
Yes.
Is this 44,000? Is this in that repairs to building? Or is it, are you saying this 44,000 buried just in the different accounts?
That's kind of how I thought about it. Here's
But
my,
there is a 44,000 that's in repairs to building in the 2601.430.
it is, I see it right there. Yeah.
I believe that's the one, Stephanie. I believe that's it.
Oh, so he budgeted it.
Yes, that's what I mean. I mean, that
I want to
went
make sure
in-
it was the same amount.
that was a significant, you know, part of his strategy to try to maintain this building that had been neglected, you know, or these two buildings.
Well, what's interesting,
It's-
that line item is down $101,000 from the year before.
But I think because he may have tried to be a little more defined
Strategic.
in his budget area categories, if that makes sense.
Sure. Right, electrical supplies went up, HVAC supplies went up. Not sure what else, but
Roger's probably going to jump in, so he can clarify that. But, as I was saying,
I'm only giving us 6 more minutes on this, by the way, and then I'm gonna call it a night.
Yeah, that'd be good.
we'll let him know when he gets here. He's got
Okay.
6 minutes. He's got 3.5. So you get the rest.
Yeah, we lean on you guys' time after work way too much at this point. Let me, if I could, let me take a couple minutes while Roger's getting here, because I really want to talk about the process recommendations and the provisional recommendations that I had put into the slide deck that went through with the school board. And let me just share those, make sure that everybody, at least the folks that are on the call today, are on board with some of those, or if you wanted to maybe fine tune them a little bit. So, this was the process recommendations that we had put together, and we had talked about a number of these, but we didn't have a chance to finalize that before the school board meeting. So I wanted to take the opportunity now to do that. This first one, the strategic direction be incorporated into the budgeting process, that was a recommendation that we had last year as well. Is really being able to understand it. And I have to say, at least from my perspective, this year it's been a lot better. I think understanding, I think where we're going, although we had a lot less engagement by Adam this year than we did last year for whatever reason. I'm not sure what that was. Maybe he's more comfortable with you, Michelle, taking the lead on all the hard stuff. The same, we also had the second one here, which is a multi-year budget. We had that last year as well. And I think this might be confusing to a number of people. I don't think anybody's looking for the type of detail that goes into a next year budget, but more of a, high level, I don't know how many lines, one spreadsheet, one tab size, not every single line scheduled out, but a very high level approach of where things are going, so we get a better understanding of the direction that it is. Anybody have issues with those two as a ongoing recommendations?
Well, I know what you're going for with that multi-year budget, but I think the terminology is problematic because we do not have multi-year budgets, and you're not going to have a
Right.
multi-year budget. So maybe a different way of phrasing that. You mentioned, you said high level. That's really what we're looking for. I'm not sure what the best way is to phrase it, but
What if we change
budget.
budget to outlook? Like you're looking for a multi-year outlook, right?
Plan.
Plan.
I mean, I've always done,
Forecast.
next year's budget, 5-year plan.
Yeah, that would be right. You can have a multi-year plan, but not a multi-year budget.
Right.
It's not really a plan though either. It's a forecast. So I think saying a multi-year forecast is critical. Just so that we have the mindset that we're looking into the future and anything that might pop up.
Joel, can I comment or speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. I'm very much interested in operating in this manner, and I'm looking for clarification because I think it's kind of managing the school's implementation of the strategic vision, And to do that, a lot of it has to do with, what you're forecasting you want to do with your courses and your programs, and then you're managing the attrition, and the retirement of your staff in order to carry out. And that's where you're going to get the biggest, influence on the budget, is defining what you want to offer as a school. And Stephanie, I'll use this as an example, like Latin, like determining if we want to keep Latin. That's going to have implications on the budget, substantial implications on the budget. And so that's just one example. You're looking at a $150,000 program for, if you keep that going. And so that adds up very quickly. But so being able to like forecast that and get the buy-in of the school board and this group, and support and have the conversations happening in years before, it helps you start to plan as a building what you need to do to order to kind of implement the strategic vision. And then it's up to the administration to kind of manage that. And I'm very comfortable operating in that as in my role as principal. I just need clarification on what that looks like. And if there's a certain way you want that reported out, or the school board wants that reported out, every school district's a little bit different. I just got to learn what's going to work for people. So Mark, to your point, like, what does that look like? As you were trying to explain, I like the outlook, the forecast, but seeing maybe in examples of how you guys are comfortable with it, if people come across it, on how it's reported out, I'd be interested in working towards that.
Today I'm going through 15 years worth of papers to throw out in my barn. And I found from the first year I was on the school board, the goals of the school board, which they used to do as a board. This one from 2000, which is 20 years ago, prepare a long-range plan for the district that addresses projected population growth, educational program improvements, staff development, facilities and infrastructure, governance, and community relations. We wanted to do that 20 years ago. We still haven't done it. But that fits right in there. A long-range plan that includes all of those, data points.
Well, we do have some pieces of that. We do have the curriculum cycle that's in the table of contents, the 10-year capital projects plan. We have the Souhegan Joint Facilities Committee that looked at the, Souhegan 2.0. So I think there has been some headway, made on that. But, to your point about the master schedule, and as Mike pointed out, dovetailing those plans into sort of a vision for the budget, that I think can be refined for sure. Roger is in the meeting. I didn't know if folks were aware of that, so
Hey,
I was
Roger.
asking him if he was going to join us, and he was here. So thank you, Roger.
No
I
problem.
appreciate you jumping in.
Do we want to go back to the,
$44,000 cushion.
I hate using that word. I really
Just
hate using
kidding.
that word.
Just kidding. Yes, Roger, I was trying to describe the 20 cents per square foot that you had included in the budget that amounted to 44,000, and maybe you can address it with this group and explain the origin of that.
Yeah, so for the repairs to the building, I've put this line item in actually all the school districts. What I found with planning for maintenance accounts is we account for everything right down as far as electricity, all of that, but we don't really account for anticipated repairs of all of our systems. And what I pick up with that is our fire systems, our lift repairs, our gym equipment, our hood repair. We include service contracts for all of our contractors to come in and go through all of our systems. And what they're doing with that contract is they're going through the system like we've asked them to, but they also identify repairs that are not actually included in the contract that they're going through. So we need to some way account for those repairs that need to be identified as they're going through those systems. I can't actually predict every part of the building that is going to break down. So ideally, I just give a 20 cents or percentage, a cents per square foot to account for those anticipated repairs.
And Roger, that's this $44,000 right here? It was
Yeah,
sharing.
if it's, it's really small on my screen, but if it's
sorry.
2601, 430,
You got it.
30,
Yeah.
then that's definitely
Once-
the account. Yep.
Sorry
Yeah.
about that. I have this 28-inch screen that I'm reading it off. Okay, but a question for you, Roger. Last year, that budget line item was 145,000.
That's correct. Last year, that budget line item actually included the percentage of the Amherst facility staff that is shared by Souhegan. This year, we've actually moved that account line to a different account.
Sorry, Roger, what did that include? I didn't quite catch that.
It's, Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's a certain percentage of the Amherst facility staff.
So there's certain tradesman positions that when they were hired in Amherst, the expectation was that they would also support Souhegan, like electrician, carpenter, of that nature. So there's a portion of time that they spend at Souhegan, and they're not Souhegan staff. So Souhegan gets billed for the time that we anticipate that they'll spend there. And that gets budgeted. Last year, apparently it was budgeted in that one line item. It's not really a repair to the building. It's contracted services for,
Okay,
tradesmen. So that's why
So-
Roger moved it.
moved it around. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea behind that was in trying to reduce the cost of bringing in contractors all the time to do work.
Mhm.
And there was definitely, I think there was a savings. And Roger, I don't think we've looked at that since, for a year or two to see if we're still saving money doing that versus bringing in contractors. It's probably something next year we should look at and do an analysis of to see how that works out.
Yeah,
And-
I would.
Is
Oh,
this
go
it
ahead.
right here? This 110 that moved over?
Yeah.
Got it.
I would be surprised if you're not saving money on that arrangement, and the flexibility to not have to wait to when a carpenter can fit you into their schedule, but to have items, planned within your own needs, I think is.
Oh, running it like a single district, huh?
Kind of like that, yeah.
You did that with the food service staff member too, right? The chef, someone? Did we? Never mind.
When we were closed for a little bit, yeah.
And I just wanted to speak to that. There's certainly some savings with bringing in in-house staff, but we also have to have a happy balance of outside vendors and in-house staff for just the different types of projects that we want to take on, and just the timelines that we have as well. There's always just a happy balance.
And there's a balance of expertise too.
Yes.
You want to have, as Roger said, you want to have that mix. You have people that are familiar with your building and provide that flexibility and expertise in-house, but then having contracted, some outside vendors, you're always staying in touch with.
The latest.
Those services that you may not have a need to provide internally all the time.
Roger, I also wanted to thank you for doing the video tour of those projects. That was really helpful.
Yeah, because no one had ever let Jeannie in the boys' locker room before.
They never let me in.
And it was an
And
empty
I should
building.
forget, but Michelle records these things. It's not right.
Yeah, I know. And I'll tell you, the whole video thing, it's usually me alone. I'm usually alone walking around talking to myself. So it's the oddest thing. But then I'm like, if it's just a silent film, that's even weirder.
I know, because you kept pointing out the eye wash things in every single lab. I thought, well, wait, he has to say something.
Well, I'm glad you liked them.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roger. Sorry to interrupt your evening.
No problem. Is there any other questions?
Anybody?
You got him here.
No. Roger, thank you for clarifying that 44,000. I was trying to understand and be able to be ready to explain it if anyone asked, because some people hear that sort of explanation or before your explanation that there's a slush fund, and I hate that term.
Yeah.
And
I
I'm going
just-
like,
I just
no,
wanted to-
there's more to it. So I think your idea of, we have contractors come in, they're reviewing, they're looking at things, and then we have to repair, and we need money in order to do that. That is essential. So that's great. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Night.
Thank you, Roger.
Bye-bye.
So, Jeannie, you take a look at these two slides on facilities and let me know how you want to make them different. Let me
Okay.
go back and I'm going to hold you for 6 more minutes here, quarter of, because I do want to get some more feedback on. I think I made some adjustments to these as we were talking. This item here, comprehensive set of metrics. I seem to recall last year that Adam put a whole bunch of stuff together in his original budget presentation. And this year he kind of just gave us a little memo. So maybe this is really a question for Mike, is how you look at some of the, what I guess I would call like the efficiency based metrics, students, teachers per student, teachers or students per guidance counselor. What else do you look? I mean, this is not what I do. So,
Yeah.
but to look back and be able to compare from a budget standpoint over time would be something that I'd be interested in seeing, and whether you even manage to that. You might not even think about things in terms of that way.
Oh, no, as a building principal, I look at it a little bit differently than probably someone like Michelle will look at it. Like, like Michelle's the bean counter, right? And I want to make sure that we are adding value to the experience that our students are getting. And so sometimes I'm not exactly like, it's not always about having the right, class size ratio and teacher to student load or counselor. It all depends on what your strategic vision for the district is, your mission, and then what you're putting a value on in creating. So there's different metrics, but I will tell you, definitely guided by class size, and it's usually a range, and definitely guided like with counselors, it's definitely, what you want to do. And I'll give you an example. There's a little like interpretation of that. Right now, because of the way society is going, there are more mental health and social emotional issues that our students are coming in with. Therefore, you need different skill sets of your counselors or different type of counselors to go ahead and work with that population as they're navigating it. Adding COVID, that changes it. So I'll give you an example. So technically, we could be a little high on counselors, right? You might say, hey, there might be a little bit of, you don't need as many. But for this year, I want to be cautious on reducing that. And if that's still true, next year we can figure that out. And then there is some attrition happening within our counseling so we can manage that. So that's some of the metrics that I would use as we do that. The other piece is you want to like do audits of your personnel, Joel. So you're constantly looking at how many administrators you have, how many admin assistants, what's their role and responsibility, giving them what they're doing. Like how many pairs in special ed kind of assistance and support roles, depending on the needs of your student body. You look at different support services, sometimes you're able to outsource those, if like with social workers or school psych. So there's different things that you can do there. And then it comes down to, what do you want to, like, what do you want to offer on, how do you want to reconfigure your classes? And what do you want the demands of your teacher to be? How many classes do you want them to teach? And how much planning time do you want them to have? So when I look at things like that, I look at all that stuff as I'm managing it. But I will tell you, you want to be as fiscally responsible and lean as you can and still have the value to the experience that you want for the families and the kids that the community wants. And so it's a kind of a delicate thing. And so I get to look at it in that manner, and then you get into conversations with groups like you and Michelle, and they say, hey, you can't do it that way.
So just so you know, the way I
No.
think about the world, Mike, it
Yeah.
is I'm trying to find the best story to get you what you need for resources.
Yeah.
And part of it is if you don't have a good story, you're not going to get it. And the way I kind of think about it is you can get through me in this committee, you're going to get through the voters.
Yeah.
That's
And
that's the
Joel,
hope, right?
I appreciate you saying that, because here's the thing that I think that I've looked at schools differently in the last 10 years than maybe others. Schools are a business. And there's that educational side, right? But schools are a business, and our product is the students' experience that is created on behalf of them and their parents. And there's a brand, and we control that narrative as a school, and that narrative gets to you, and that narrative gets to the parents. And so if a school is doing what they're supposed to be doing, you can sell budgets. You don't have to sell budgets. I want to take that phrase out of it. You don't have to, because if you are fiscally responsible and telling a good story and controlling the narrative, and so he can do a far better job at that. And there's ways we can do that as a school. So then the story doesn't have to be so hard on you to tell. You know what I mean? Because everyone wants good schools. And so I can just tell you that I'm very much look at school as a business, look at our organization as a brand, and that's a little bit different. And Souhegan is getting used to that a little bit as me as the principal. And so some of the structural changes that we're making and the audits that we're doing with the administrative assistants and the admin are a result of that. So I agree with you, but those are some of the things that I look at. And I can, moving forward, I can always kind of organize some things and present it in a much more articulate manner to you guys if you want, or Stephanie at the school board, if that's appropriate in the spring, for sure.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. I think we talked about this at a prior meeting, this last one here, about having a master schedule in place and what comes first. And I know, Mike, you said, give me some more time because haven't been able to do that transition yet. So hopefully next year we had the conversation, you'll have a different.
Yeah. So I'll give you a little preview what that could look like, right? Very much. We're not going to have the courses like outlined, like the master schedule that I can hand like Michelle and Stephanie in like, May or June of 20. And that's like, here's what we're going to offer in the fall if everything stays the same. But what you can have is you can have document that provides you like, here's what we're going to offer. Here's last year's, schedule. Here's what's different, what we anticipate the difference is going to be for next year. I don't think at this time in any school year that I've ever been a part of, I'll be able to produce this specific master schedule, but I can give you a change form that's aligned with the strategic vision and why we're moving in that direction. And that should give you an idea. And then it's also, you can anticipate based on retirements and attrition of how you're going to manage that FTE of your administrative assistants and your paras and your teachers. That very much can be done. And I think by this time next year, we'll be able to do that. And we're making a presentation to the school board in December of like what that process will look like for us moving forward between now and then. And that's I think in like the next week or two, or, Stephanie, so a brief presentation.
The
Because
21st,
I'll never be
whatever.
able to do that. You know what I mean? People have this idea that the master schedule can be done. It's just never going to be done, but you guys should have a window in of like where we're going and why we're going in that direction. And, when I say, hey, it's not going to be above the operating budget, or it's actually going to be anticipated 3 less positions based on where we're at and what programs we're going to be offering. And I should be able to say those things, and that should be a reasonable expectation of this group and the school board. Or if we need more, heaven forbid, I don't think Souhegan needs more. I need you to know that, right? It can be reallocated and to get the job, get the school to where we need to go. But like, that going in, right? And the reasons why. That's reasonable and fair conversation to be having. So.
Thank you.
Like, that would be great. Yeah, having some sort of a change document. That's awesome.
Yeah. We'll have a small version of this year, not like in years of moving forward will be different. It'll be much more complex, but this year will be a small version of it.
Thank you. So we had this on the next slide at this point. I was not particularly impressed with Steve's response during the school board meeting about, well, there's nothing we can do, so we'll just pass on whatever cost we get out of from the New Hampshire retirement folks to the taxpayers. To me, we need to understand where it's going, and there might be something we can do. I don't know what that is yet, but that's something I think from a management standpoint, the SAU needs to think about somehow.
Well, Steve did ask about if there's alternatives for funding a retirement plan other than the New Hampshire retirement system, and the answer was no. Once you are in that system, and we're going to stay there, there's a level of control that the SAU just doesn't have. The only lever that an SAU or district has with regards to retirement obligations is how many people they employ.
Well, it's how many people they employ. It's what their salaries are. It's, the special retirement arrangements that we've provided does have an impact on what our pension obligations end up becoming.
Yeah, all those factors.
There's the contributions that the teachers would expect to make. I mean, it would also get built into salary expectations. If you look at the total cost of an employee, and you're finding out that pension benefits by themselves at 27-28% of gross salary numbers. That's it gets significant. One of and I put a couple questions into the spreadsheet. Thank you very much, Michelle, for opening it and let me go wild for a little bit. But for example, the job descriptions of the teachers are pretty historic is not the right word. They perhaps are based on a paradigm that we might need to rethink. For example,
you can say archaic.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about this, and to pay a teacher for 2 days working over the summer as an adder to their base salary, maybe. I'm not sure if it's necessarily wrong, but why isn't that part of their base salary? Maybe you can't do it for all the existing teachers, but for any new hire, part of your job is 2 days, an extra 2 days a year. Why are we paying summer stipends, for example, or additional days? And part of it is, I guess the way I think about it, part of it is it's a relationship with the teachers that we have to avoid perhaps being in the union. But then what benefit do we have for not having unionized teachers if we're acting the exact same way that in not looking for the flexibility that a non-union workforce would provide? Anyway, that's my soapbox.
Could I just add, Joel, because I think we may have sort of forgotten another piece of this, and it's like there's so much that we can control. I understand, especially on the retirement obligations, but there, I think I always felt an obligation when I was on the board to make sure that when I saw something that was being handed down to us from the state, that I contacted my legislators, whether it was something they were voting on or whether it was the fact that they were pushing down, retirement obligations to us and therefore our taxpayers. And I don't know whether the board feels that obligation to contact their legislators, or whether the SAU does or the superintendent does, but I do think that there's a piece of this that is really important to think about.
Well, and absolutely. So, instead of throwing up our hands and saying there's nothing we can do about it, is there a discussion piece that we have that when we think about what this budget looks like and what the 27% increase in the retirement obligation funding, that was one of those that perhaps you invite all your, state reps in and have a conversation about.
Right. And I think that's definitely
but
something that needs to be built in to being an elected official.
Right. Short of having knowing that the cost is going up 27%, is there some piece that we're going to be able to explain why, what we're doing about it?
Well,
Again, it's, you don't have that much that you can control at this point.
Yeah, especially.
Sorry,
since this-
taxpayers, your taxes are going up. There's nothing we can do about it. Oh, there's a lot they can do about it. We won't like the alternative. There's, you know, if you think about this in terms of there are limited dollars out there before something, you know, not good happens. Yeah.
Well, Joel, I'll speak to that a little bit, that the control that we do have, and Michelle, tell me if I'm wrong on this, so please, yeah. I might be overstepping, but the control that we have, and one of the appeals of coming here as a school leader is, if according to the PPC, they'll have in the next 3 to 5 years, 33 to 35%, or 33 or 40% of the teaching staff potentially retiring at Souhegan. So when I talk about managing the attrition and the retirement, is how you replace those salaries, right? And who you replace them with, and attracting the type to carry on the work of the school. And, you know, it will be very, very important to the long range budget implications for Souhegan High School.
And
Substantial, and the most substantial thing that we can control. And you know, it's going to be a fun project of working on Souhegan, is to transition it from the school that was founded in the 90s and attracted all these great educators that came and stayed, right? And that's super rare. And now it's coming time for these people to move on. And how you replace these gargantuan salaries, which they are pretty substantial for teachers. And then you can be able to make some shifts in the budget. Michelle, like, is my mindset and thought process appropriate?
Yeah, I think you're right on the mark, that, and it kind of goes to Joel's point earlier about, you know, what's the longer vision, you know, and just being mindful about how we move toward replacing, you know, those staff as there are retirements in the future, and, you know, building from there.
and
It is a balancing act, because, you know, depending on the position you're replacing, there may be a limited pool, especially as we do have a retiring, aging population of teachers in general. But I think that there are a lot of, you know, qualified new individuals coming into the field too, that, you know, we should be able to work within a nice balance there.
And the really interesting, exciting part for me is you can decide, all right, what kind of programs do we want as these people decide to move on? And maybe we don't need some of the programs, or desire to have some of those programs that exist. And then you can evolve your strategic vision to align with programs that you want to exist for, you know, the markets and the industry and the college and career readiness for 2030, right? And you're planning for that, not, you know, 2025, you're planning beyond. So what do you need in your school to produce kids to be ready to go into, you know, right into industry, which I think is going to happen more, and into college, which is going to be, acceptance is going to change. Right now, it's going to change forever. The college acceptances, and that way it's going to be forever changed because of how the standardized testing is being devalued across the nation. And so we have to plan for those things. And then when we have this opportunity with people moving on, you can manage what you offer, and then manage who staffs that. So it's very exciting, and it's a really opportunistic time, and you can really, in my opinion, affect the budget, Joel. You know what I mean? Like, substantial. So,
But Joel, you mentioned to me that we were expecting to see a decrease in teacher salaries because we were replacing some retiring teachers with lower salaried teachers. But that, you said that didn't happen in this year's budget. Is that right, Joel?
haven't been able to find it yet, Jeannie. So I believe there were 8 teachers that retired last year. And the original expectation was that we were going to be able to replace them with less qualified, less lower cost teachers. And that was, I believe, $108,000 savings across all 8 teachers. And if I look at the increase on teacher salaries year to year, they go up about 3.3%, and that looks just like a step, the step change in the PPC matrix. So where'd the money go?
So you didn't
I've
see the
asked some
savings.
questions to get into a little more, to get more granular about it, to really try to understand exactly what happened there. I mean, because, some teachers, they could have rehired teachers or hired new teachers at the same levels or at a higher level. And, and frankly, as Mike was saying, if they're hiring to meet a certain new standard, dual enrollment, for example, and they need certain certifications, you might be having to hire much more experienced teachers or more trained teachers in order to do that.
Well, that,
It's one of the-
remember they talked about master teachers last year, and those I would think would have I guess the dual enrollment that we're talking about, we're going to, I would assume, cost more. But is that what happened? Mike, did we get a lot of master teachers in that? Do we know?
I'd have to look. No, I'm gonna say I'll jump off the jump. I don't think we got more experienced teachers that can do some of the dual enrollment, but that's just off the jump. You know what I mean? Like one of my observations. I know we did bring in some younger people, two in particular. Towards the end of the summer, we made some decisions. But I wasn't here during that early part of the budget of like who was brought in and who was moved around a little bit. And I know there was some of that happening. And
Right.
This is very much a transition year. Like I can say that in my conversations with Adam Steele and Christine Lanworl and Michelle, this is very much a transition year at Souhegan. So I can understand why they may not have had as big of savings, Joel, because they were transitioning.
I just can't find it yet. I can't say
Yeah,
it
and then
didn't happen.
but they also is like some of the people that moved on were administrators too. Like Kathy White moved on, and so it might not be 8 pure teachers. There might be other positions like
It might
paras.
not have all been it might not have all been curriculum.
Right. So I just can't speak to it exactly.
Good
But
point.
we'll, moving forward, I'll be able to talk to it a little more in detail about, the personnel of it and how we manage that attrition and movement.
Okay, well, I don't want to hold anybody up. We're at 8 o'clock now, so we're already way over. Please take a look at the recommendations here, and to the extent that you have any adds to it, or you want to fine tune a little bit, really, please. Looking for all the help we can get here. So with that, we are back on as the joint budget workshop on Monday. Is that correct? The 7th?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. And everybody should have gotten panelist.
Yes. Did
Panelist
everybody
invite?
get an invite?
But you'll be there, Michelle, so you can turn anybody into a panelist in real time.
Exactly. Shoot me an email or just contact me if you do not have the invitation for any reason, and I'm happy to resend it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Enjoy
night,
it,
all.
folks. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thanks.
Good night.